All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping into one of the most provocative, most misunderstood books in philosophy, Friedrich Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. And look, this isn't just a book. It's basically a declaration of war on, about 2,000 years of Western thinking. So let's get right into it. Nietzsche kicks things off with this incredible line right in the preface. He's basically asking, hey, what if truth isn't some prize you win with clumsy, serious, dogmatic arguments? What if all these philosophers, with their heavy-handed approaches, have just been terrible at wooing her? This one question just sets the stage for a complete teardown of everything we think we know about truth. So, to get through Nietzsche's intellectual fireworks, here's our game plan. We'll start with the big problem with truth itself. Then, we're going to pull back the curtain on the philosophers. From there, we'll slice into the two kinds of morality, get to the core concept of the will to power, and finally catch a glimpse of Nietzsche's vision for a totally new kind of person. All right, first up, the problem with truth. So, why did Nietzsche think philosophy had been on the wrong track for so long? Well, in his view, the whole thing was basically a house of cards. Now, this is a pretty radical accusation, right? He's saying that these giants, guys like Plato, they didn't really discover some cosmic good in itself. Nah. What they actually did was take popular beliefs of their time, superstitions like the idea of an immortal soul, and just dress them up in really complicated, fancy-sounding arguments. So you end up with these huge, impressive systems that are, at their core, kinda hollow. And this leads him to question something even more basic. This whole idea of opposites. We think of truth and error, or good and selfishness, as being on opposite teams. But Nietzsche asks, what if they're not? What if they're actually related, maybe even intertwined? And here's the kicker. He suggests that maybe a little bit of untruth is actually necessary for life, and that our best good values might be completely tangled up with the evil ones we claim to hate. Okay, so if philosophy isn't this pure, noble search for truth, then what in the world is it? For Nietzsche, the answer comes when you start unmasking the philosophers themselves. This is where Nietzsche gets really psychological. He says, look, when you read Kant or Spinoza, you aren't reading objective logic. You're reading their secret diary. You're seeing their deepest instincts laid bare. A philosopher doesn't find a truth. They start with a gut feeling, a prejudice about how the world ought to be, and then they build this massive, complex system just to justify it. They're not seekers, they're lawyers for their own biases. And what's driving this whole process? Nietzsche calls it a tyrannical impulse. It sounds intense, I know, but he means that creating a philosophy isn't a passive act of discovery. It's an act of domination. It is the most sophisticated form of a will that says, the world will make sense according to my rules, my interpretation. It's about imposing your own order onto chaos. So, if philosophy is just a fancy justification for a moral viewpoint, it kind of begs the question, where do our morals even come from? And this brings us to one of Nietzsche's absolute bombshell ideas. Nietzsche says that historically, there have really only been two kinds of morality. First, you have master morality. This is the morality of the ruling class, the powerful. For them, good is easy. It's everything that's like them. Strength, pride, power. Bad is just anything weak or pathetic. Then you have slave morality. This is born from the oppressed, the suffering. It starts with resentment. They look at their powerful masters and call them evil. Then, in a brilliant move, they flip everything on its head. If the masters are evil, then everything they are not, humble, patient, sympathetic, must be good. And for Nietzsche, it's this slave morality that has completely taken over the Western world. As we're digging into these concepts, it's probably a good moment to pause on this super famous line. It's a warning, really. Nietzsche is telling us that when you start staring into these deep, dark parts of human nature, the origins of good and evil, it's not a one-way street. You don't just observe the abyss. It observes you right back. This stuff changes you. This brings us to the absolute bedrock of his entire worldview. What is the one fundamental force that's driving the masters, the slaves, the philosophers, literally everything? Think about it. We're always taught that our most basic instinct is survival, right? Self-preservation. But Nietzsche wants us to hit pause on that. A living thing, he says, doesn't just want to be, it wants to become more. And he calls this the will to power. This, for him, is the true engine of all life. It's not about just not dying. It's about discharging your strength, growing, expanding, overcoming. A tree reaching for the sun, an empire conquering territory, it's all the will to power. And that survival instinct? That's just a side effect, a consequence of a will to power that's succeeding. And there it is, the ultimate formula. It's not that life has a will to power. It's that life is will to power. For Nietzsche, they're one and the same. To be alive is to struggle, to grow, to seek power. It's what life is from the inside out. Okay, so if philosophy is just biased, morality is a human invention, and all of life is this raw will to power, where does that leave us? Well, for Nietzsche, this isn't a dead end. It's an open door for something entirely new. He imagines a new kind of philosopher, a philosopher of the future. And forget any image of a stuffy academic. No, these people are commanders and lawgivers. They understand that values aren't just floating out there waiting to be found. They are created by human will. And their job isn't to find the truth, it's to forge it, to hammer new values into existence. Their very search for knowledge is an act of creation. It's the will to power in its most sublime form. This individual has to stand alone. In an age of what Nietzsche called herding animal morality, where everyone just wants to be equal, safe, and comfortable, this new philosopher embraces being different. Their nobility doesn't come from their family name, but from the raw strength of will it takes to create meaning for themselves in a world that has none. And that leaves us with a final, piercing question. You see, Nietzsche's philosophy isn't just something to be understood. It's a challenge. To truly go beyond good and evil means leaving the comfort of the herd. It means facing that abyss all by yourself. And so Nietzsche forces us to ask, do we actually have the strength for that kind of freedom?